want to say welcome, Professor Smalls. Welcome back, I Never Knew TV.
Thank you, sir. It's good to be back.
It's a serious
I
thing.
heard that we were well received the last time around the world.
No, serious thing. The
So
people
that was
asked for
good.
number 2, so here it is, First question I have is a conversation I had with a brethren. I wanted to hear from the master teacher your view on this. Is littering a form of mental illness?
Ask that again.
Is littering a form of mental illness?
Oh, is littering a form of mental illness? One could say that depending on the environment that you're working with, right? Because you must have a relationship with your environment that involves keeping that environment healthy. And that involves having a respect for that environment that you're living in. But then that involves having respect for yourself living in that environment. And so when you see people who litter indiscriminately, it means they do not respect the environment they live in because they do not respect themselves living in that environment. And they do not see the sense of healthiness that is necessary to live in an environment where you have harmony and balance with that environment. And so one can say when people, especially when you see a lot of littering going on where people are under an enormous amount of stress, and that the stress, there's no mechanism in society to manage the stress for many people. And so people who are under this extraordinary stress, and then they're abused by many of the institutions of the society because of the actions that or reactions that come from the stress, that their response is really almost a self-hatred. And that is reflected in what we call the littering or the contamination of the environment they live in. So I guess at the end of the day, you could say, yes, it is a form of mental illness.
The O.J. Simpson trial that took place in 1994 to 1995, which the press called the trial of the century, right? Mm-hmm. Do you believe it would have received a percentage of the media attention it received if the victim was a black woman?
If the victim was a black woman in the O.J. Simpson trial, I don't think we would have seen 1/10 of the attention that it received. It would have been a black man who happened to be a celebrity killing a black woman or being tried for killing a black woman, because we accept the court system in America and its conclusions as being the validation of whether you did something or didn't do something. In this case, no one accepted the court system. All of a sudden, the court system had no value because in this case, it vindicated a black man who was being tried for killing a white man and a white woman. And in the history of America, you rarely see, celebrity or not, a black individual walk free out of the court system for killing a white man, especially a white woman, but particularly a white man and woman. And so it doesn't matter to the society because of its racism and its history of anti-African racism whether Simpson was innocent or not. The thing was, he was in proximity of the killing and had probable motive, and so the society decided, the white society, that he was guilty. And when the court didn't prove him guilty, there was something wrong with the court system. There was something wrong with the prosecution's office, who put on the best trial anyone could put on, even though Simpson's lawyer were extraordinary lawyers. I don't believe until this day that he was guilty. I think they wasted time trying to convict the black man and solve the problem, that no one ever thought of really seriously trying to find out if something else happened in that house that day and how it happened.
And I believe, all right, so O.J. Simpson died recently, right?
Yes.
And I hear all this talk about progress in race relations, specifically progress of black women, right? Mm-hmm. And I was reading something in 2022, I believe 97,000 black women were missing. But also, like, what has changed in race relations from the 90s till now? Because with his death, I see the same jargon that was being presented to the public in the 90s.
I don't think anything has changed in terms of racism in America. Something may have changed in how that gets managed in the public arena. How you talk about racism and the abuse of racists. How you talk about the consequences of negative racial behavior towards African people by European and others, especially Eurasian people. As far as the attitude towards Africans, that hasn't changed. Because the reason for the attitude is the same, it's white inferiority. And as long as white inferiority is the dominant attitude, especially in male white consciousness, the resentment of black male consciousness in black male bodies will always be there. It is that resentment that, when carried out as policy and attitude, that we call racism, right? And it is able to be implemented because the people who are carrying out that negative attitude towards the African has the power to implement their behavior. And that hasn't changed. We've seen black women who have been graduating from college at an extraordinary number. That's greater than white women or Asian women. And they're moving up in the system politically and corporate-wise faster than any other group of women in the world. And so there's the assumption, because black women are making this rise, that racism have been mitigated considerably. But there are no signs to show that, because the glass ceilings are still there all over the places for those black women. And at the same time, they're the best trained instrument in the corporate structure. So who else are you going to put there except the best strain that your society has produced? And right now, black women are the best strain in the largest number of white or black males or white females.
I'm glad you brought that up. That's why I mentioned the amount of missing women, because it's still, I think people have this idea that black women are more valued than they are, and they're being used out of necessity, but not out of the actual value of the person.
Black women are still, to white society, the negative stereotype that they've used with the N-word to describe ourselves. Their value is as a tool, not as a person, okay? They're some of the best trained tools in America. Maybe people won't like the way I use that term tool, but we got to deal with fundamental reality. All of us are tools. This system is run by 1% of 1% in terms of who control the majority wealth, who control the majority banking, who control the majority corporate structures in the world. 1% of 1%. The rest of us are nothing but tools, okay? And so it's just that right now the best trained group of tools or tooling instrument happens to be black women. And and I don't think that these black women are under any illusions once they move into the structure about who they are. Because I have children. I have 3 black African women who are in the corporate structure.
High in the corporate structure.
High in the corporate structure.
Very high.
Very high in the corporate structure. And I was talking to one the other day, and she said, "Daddy, I'm at a place where I'm as high as I can go here, and I'm scheduled for the next level, but they're telling me there's no opening at my next level." So they've closed the ceiling because they don't want her to move. At that next level, you have multiple of assistants doing multiple things that you're now doing and allowing you to expand and do other things. I have 2 within the educational structure at the top of their game in their areas of education. I'm not going to call name of specific tasks. And they're meeting with the same things. We watched our beautiful sister, the district attorney, down in Atlanta, how they treated her in the media. You would never see a white woman treated like that in the media. With the fact that this is her boyfriend and he works on her staff. One of the most capable attorneys in Atlanta, this young man was. But they wanted to destroy that black woman who had the skills, the organizational tools to organize the kind of team that can bring a corrupt former president on trial for interfering in the election process, and to dare to do it. And then you had the same thing. Have you seen how the media have treated the Attorney General here in New York, who happens to be a black woman, at the top of her game? All right? Her cases that she's brought are all extraordinary, but the media treat her like she's just, I don't want to say Aunt Jemima, because Aunt Jemima is a very positive figure, fortunately. Most people got angry and wanted her name taken off of the syrup bottle, right? But it was originally put on there as a tribute to her skills, not as a demeaning thing. Because just as we see the black women today being one of the most valued and trained instrument in the society, in the 1700s and 1800s, she also was that. You know, when the black woman was in the kitchen, she was called a cook. When the white woman was in the kitchen, she was a culinary scientist. Yeah, the black woman was at the top of her culinary game. Most of the cuisines in America that make up the American cuisine comes from the African women, who were the chefs in most of the homes of the millionaires and billionaires in America for much of the centuries when the wealth in America was being garnered. In most of the restaurants, the great restaurants of New York, San Francisco, Chicago, the primary cuisines of those communities were created by black women. Yet history don't reflect that. In terms of, they'll say, oh, they were in the kitchen. No, they ran the kitchen. The kitchen is the primary aspect of any restaurant. It is that if you have a major hotel, the restaurant is a significant aspect of that hotel, and the kitchen is the most primary aspect of that restaurant. And that black woman has always been, and she wasn't always and almost the cooks. Cooking was the least of what black women did, even in the 1900s and the early 20th century. She was a writer, she was a singer, she was a teacher, she was an engineer, she was a doctor, she was a lawyer, she was all of those things, and excelled at all of those things. But racism didn't allow the media to tell her story on a weekly basis or monthly basis or yearly basis. And when they set up their awards to give people for having done well in these crafts, racism left out the most brilliant of them all, which was the black woman.
Why do you believe collectively black people are so resilient, and is resistance one of the epigenetic inheritances from our ancestors?
It's like there's I practice the Yoruba spiritual or scientific sacred approach to understanding divinity and cosmology and ecology. And in there's one character who you also find in the voodoo system, and it's called Ogun. Ogun, some people say, is the god of iron, the god of war. But Ogun, in the system of African sacred science, is the forces of transformation. But transformation comes as a result of pressure being placed upon an object. The way Ogun is manifest in our culture is that it's a piece of rock that's full of impurities and probabilities that would not be useful for the future tasks that this rock has to face. So the rock is put in the fire, and the heat is raised to a level that you burn out these impurities. And then you use a hammer to put pressure on that hot rock that the impurities have been burned out, to mold it into a useful tool for society. And African people is like that rock that makes up the concept called Ogun, that goes through the transformation that eliminates the impurities of character based on the pressure that's placed upon the rock itself. And so we were under such pressure to survive in a world dominated by the uncivilized ignorance of the European personality, especially here in the Western Hemisphere. And I says the ignorant, uncivilized personality, because history will bear that out, that they didn't bring to the Americas any technology of any significance. They brought Africans to America who had the technologies of significance for the agriculture, for the industry building, for the timber industry, and on and on. This is the Africans being brought to the Western Hemisphere, to the Caribbean, the United States, Central South America. We bring the technology from Africa and we build the corporate structure under pressure and duress, the barrel of the gun and the sling of the sword for hundreds of years. Out of that kind of pressure, where we're not allowed to speak our language. Now, language is how you reinterpret yourself. We're not allowed to practice our culture. Our culture is how you give birth to yourself. We're not allowed to practice our family structure. That is how you create the unity that allows for the safety and well-being of the self. They took all of that away from us deliberately in order to create a non-functional social being. And we had to create new ways of being social beings without being destroyed. And it's that pressure that has produced this extraordinary black man and woman, particularly in North America, because North America is made up primarily of the North Americans and the black Caribbean. We built North America, going back to the 1500s really, but particularly from the 1700s on. And so we've shown the world that the more pressure you put on the black man and woman, the greater product you're going to get responding to the challenges they have to meet. And we've done that over and over and over again, because that is what being African is about. We are the first manifestation of the human being. When the divine, if you want to call it God, the divine, the universe, the all in all, the one in one, when it decided to manifest as a human being, just as it decided to manifest as a butterfly or a mango tree, it manifested as a black woman, right? And she would give manifestation to the rest of us, including the white man, the Asian man, and all the other men and women in the world. Starts with this black woman. No science can prove anything different, you know? And so that's not just a theory, that has been the demonstrated practice of the way of life of African people, particularly in this hemisphere, because the particular kind of pressure we were put under, especially in the Caribbean and in North America.
Epigenetics, right? When people usually speak about it, they speak about negative inheritance, but we don't speak about the positive inheritances.
Right. Well, people who talk about epigenetics and then they only base themselves on the negative, that's a choice, you know, to deal with defamation of character, when, especially from a dominant group that use defamation to control the other parties. So if one look at the African who had been under the genocide of the transatlantic slave trade, the genocide of 500 years of chattel enslavement in the Americas, when you look at that kind of abuse where you no longer had control of your body, someone can rape you at will, men or women, you can be abused at will by people who were lesser beings than you physically, but because you had chains on your ankles and a gun at your head. And yet, you can come out of that with a humanity that makes their version of humanity pale. And that's throughout our history in this hemisphere. And yet, in one generation, we can produce writers and artists and artisans and doctors and lawyers and engineers that can compete with anyone they have. One generation with opportunity and freedom to demonstrate our possibilities. No one can compete with us. And so the African in the Western world, if you look at our literature, if you look at our production capability in terms of helping to construct society, if you look at our role in government in producing laws that was good for humanity, if you look at the educational system and look at our production and how to better train human beings to be better human beings, no one can compete with the African American, despite the crisis they were forced into. You know, we are the universe. Everyone knows that. You know, if you just look at us in sports, no one can compete with us on a level playing field where we don't come out victorious, equal to or better than anybody on that playing field in any art form that's presented. You know, in the classroom, let me into Harvard, let me into Princeton, I can compete with anybody you've let into Harvard and Princeton, or Oxford, or the Levant. So the African American and the African worldwide, and I don't like to even use the adjectives when we talk about world African, we're just talking about African peoples. And when you look at colonialism and the genocidal damage it had on the continent of Africa and the populations of our people on the continent of Africa, and the resilience of that population in responding against that type of human deprivation, there's nothing equal to it in the annals of history. And even when we respond to throw off the yoke of their genocidal tyranny, we do not commit genocide against them in reprisals, in any cases. You know, you can't compete with that. The African don't have to be apologetic to anybody about their behavior. The few that are so damaged and bruised and broken that they're committing the petty crimes around the communities we lived in, they're doing that because they've been put in that position. You know, you break and you fracture and you destroy someone to such a point, there's no hope, there's no opportunity that can be dreamt up in their mind for themselves. And then you blame them after deprivating them to that level or that depth of depravity when they respond in what we call crime. And yet the greatest crimes we see committed in the world, genocide committing against other peoples, we see that genocide being committed in Palestine right now. No one calls it genocide. We see that genocide committed in the Congo, greater than the one in Palestine right now, by the same Western corporate structure that supports what's going on in Palestine. No one calls it genocide. We see it all over Africa, where African governments who are just trying to be free and exercise the democratic freedom that the Western world say is appropriate, then they're sanctioned for wanting to be free. As long as they would continue into colonial slavery and economic, political, and social genocide, they're welcome into the Western world as brothers and sisters to be subjugated by the Western world. And so when Africans demonstrate this level of humanity despite the inhumanity done to them, and still can be productive within the economic arena, the political arena, and the social arena, the world appears to be in a state of shock, but yet never learn from it in terms of how they alter their own behavior. But we, the Africans of the world, I think we are still, it's in our genes to understand that we are the universe manifesting itself as a human being.
I was in Africa recently, right? And I noticed a lot of advertisement for churches. But after speaking to numerous people, I realized Africans are not necessarily practicing Christianity. Seems like majority of Africans are still practicing traditional, as you refer to, African sacred sciences. Mm-hmm. Have you witnessed this during your many trips to Africa?
Well, I've been going back and forth to the continent now for over 40 plus years. And when I first went there, my impression was everybody's Christian over here. There's a church on every corner and mega churches. But then you have to factor in how the church got there. You have to factor in colonialism and how it worked in terms of the socialization process of a population. And when someone comes and take over with the gun, and they're controlling your environment with weapons and tyranny, and then they give you certain pathways to alleviating certain amount of the tyranny. And one of those pathways would be you can go to school, but your name can't be Kwame anymore or Olu anymore. Your name got to be John or James now. If you're willing to give up Olu and Kwame and become John and James, we'll let you into our school and we'll teach you to read English or to read French or to write and to learn mathematics. Thus you can become a civil servant in the colonial substructures and lower corporate structures. And the next level is, if you would abandon the traditional sacred science of your ancestors that forces you to resist my tyranny and accept my methodology of worshiping God, which is our religion, then you will again be rewarded with status in the neo-colonial or colonial structure of the society. And so people then had to turn to church as a sanctuary against the political and military tyranny of the colonizers. But their heart may still be with the shrine in the grove. Or they would have to then turn Jesus into Obatala, but still call it Jesus. You understand? They may have to turn St. Michael into Ogun, but having to call him St. Michael. But we know the African understood clearly that God don't care what name you use, it cares what the intentions of the call and the devotion is. And so you can give me a name, but my intent and my devotion is to the Most High. You may think it's to that image you have me hanging on the wall, but I've gone past that image in terms of what I have declared to be the divine. And so I'm forced to follow your religious protocol, but you can't force me to change my psycho-spiritual understanding of sacred reality. And that's what you're seeing. And you're seeing many of the churches now being abandoned by the younger generation, who makes up something like 70% of African society now, those under 25 and younger. And they're looking to find their pathways back to structurally dealing with African sacred science. How does it look today? What is, since our evolution as a spiritual society was interrupted in terms of its own socio-cultural evolution and institutional designs. Now, how do we move on that pathway to create new institutional designs for the African sacred science to be expressed through? And what the Europeans have done, going as far back as the ancient Kemet and ancient Nubia, was to steal the African sacred science and call it Western science. Western science is a large aspect of African sacred science.
Can you speak more on that, please?
Yeah. I think I told you before, one of the ones that's easiest to see. In order to plant any crop, in order to raise any animal and mate those animals so they can reproduce, so I can increase my population, so that I can increase the value of my herds, I've got to know when is the appropriate time of year, time of month to do this. I can only know that if I study cosmology, the movements of the stars, the movement of the sun, the movement of the moons, the movement of the planet in relationship to the stars and the suns, the movement of the constellations. We call that astronomy. Astronomy is something our ancestors studied well. But then they realized that the man in the farm and the woman in the farm and the man or woman who are fishermen and the man or woman who are herdsmen and the man or woman who makes the mud brick to make the buildings that people will live in, they don't have time to study the stars. So how do I take this great science that I've studied, and they're paying me? The West called me a priest today, but in ancient days I was a scientist. And they paid me to study this so I can tell them, this is the best time to plant this crop, this is the best time to plant this fruit tree, This is the best time to harvest this crop. This is the best time to catch this fish. There's a time when you shouldn't eat that fish. This is the best time to hunt this animal. This is the best time to mate your sheep, and so forth and so on. That is determined by studying those movements in the upper body and see what the animal and plants do normally before I domesticate them when things are in a certain location and a certain orientation. So how do I teach the science now to these people who have to do all this work? I break it down into something called astrology. Astrology becomes the social explanation for the scientific phenomena we call astronomy. And then that is put into ceremonial and ritualistic context in order to teach and retain it within the culture, which is the primary educational system of the people. You know, the same thing with designing a house. Do I design a cube? Do I design a triangle? What does that mean? So I need to develop a methodology for looking at that. That I need to decide how much land that we will have to use for planting this crop or that crop. How much land does this family get versus this family get, because of the number of people in this family and the number of people in this family. So I develop a science of measurements called geometry. But that's not what the farmer don't have time to do that. This is what we, the scientists who you call the priesthood, do for the society. The society takes care of us, we take care of this for them. All of this compilation becomes the sacred science of a people. The understanding of cosmology and ecology, the relationship between cosmology, the human being, and the ecology. That's African sacred science. And that's why I said the European extract aspect of it, our mathematics, trigonometry, our geometry, our physics, and even aspects of our medicine, and call it science, Western science. Yet, the earliest books written on any of these topics is found in ancient Africa. Even the Greeks acknowledge it. Herodotus in Book 2 is all about Africa. Plato in his book Phaedrus, he says Africa gave the world all of its sciences. And he names it arithmetic, geometry, chemistry. He says medicine. This is Plato, right? And he said, but the greatest science of all that he called us Ethiopian back then, that the Ethiopians give to the world. This is Plato and Phaedra, or Phaedrus, that's the name of the book. He said the greatest science of all is writing itself. So you can't say Plato is wrong, he the man, right? So when you begin to understand this and you read Herodotus, or you go to Homer, Homer wrote the Odyssey and the Iliad. And this is considered to be the first book. Yet in the Odyssey and the Iliad, Homer said all of the gods of Greece must return to Ethiopia every season to renew themselves. Now Homer can't be wrong. You said Homer wrote the first book. You said Herodotus is the father of history. You said Plato, second only to a mixed race African Greek person you call Socrates, was the greatest philosopher ever. So they told the truth. Only when I repeat what they say, you say it's not the truth. But when they're telling the truth and they're writing, you say, oh, how great they are. So let's rely on history and those who lived those history and those who studied with the Africans and learn the science, the sacred science, which the West now call its science. Do you hear me? My people, listen to me well. I'm telling you something. What the West call Western science is a great aspect of African sacred science that they stole, copied, and plagiarized when they started invading our lands, going back to the early 3000s, 2000 BCs.
I'm not sure how I should word this question because it's such a diverse group of practices across the continent. So I'll try my best, right? Is there a universal concept of the afterlife in the African sacred sciences? Absolutely.
There is a universal concept of the African life and African sacred science. Now the Yorubas call it Awo, A-W-O in our language. And in Awo, the way they explain it is that we're born into a family, or what they call an Ibi. And when we are born into this Ibi, in the first manifestation of that particular family line, whether it goes back 5 million years, 2 million years, 500,000 years, that you will eternally be evolving and rebirthing into that family line, right? What's the word that they use? Reincarnation. All African systems talk about reincarnation, right? They may have variations in the methodology of how it takes place, but everybody says that you're born into this family in your first manifestation, and you will constantly keep replicating that family in each manifestation. They even have steps that you take. In the Yoruba system, they said you have to go and come 8 times, and in the going and coming 8 times, in each of those 8 sequences of return, you have 12 steps of quality, attributes, character development you must master. And there is a period where you don't have to come back anymore, where you become a part of the great light energy that you were before you were expressed as an aspect of the essence of that great energy that begun your process. But you always come back in the family that gave birth to you. So my mother and father, the best way to put it, gave birth to me. Well, the only thing they had to give birth to me was themselves, right? So when my mother and father gave birth to me, they gave birth to themselves, right? And once I got on the earth furthered my manifestation by feeding me the carrot, the greens, the beans, the mango, the plantain, the banana, the peach, the pear. They all come from bushes or trees that get its substance from the earth, from the minerals of the earth. The rest of me is animated from the light that comes from the sun and the moon and the stars and the Milky Ways and all of the other things in the cosmos. And so I am they. And that is replicated when I give birth to my children. Me and my wife give birth to ourselves, and we were the product of our parents who had given birth to themselves when they gave birth to us. So we are a continuum as an unbroken string of living. There is no dying in this process. There's transforming, but no dying. There is no afterlife. There's only this life. I am my mother and father. I am my grandparents. I am my great-grandparents. I am my great-great-grandparents. I am my great-great-great-grandparents, and I am my great-great-great-great-great-parents. I am a culmination of all of them, and my children is a continuum of all of that for eternity. That is the African concept of life. You know, it is forever beginning and forever living. Life is forever living and forever beginning. We constantly, beginning means we are constantly restoring our beingness. Okay? We are the universe. We are microcosm of the macrocosm. You know? And it's just like we can look at my hands. It's 5 fingers, right? You see 5 fingers. But what I see is billions of tiny little creatures called cells that have united to create the illusions of 5 fingers. But even in the illusion, they've created a utility and a possibility of use. But yet there's not one thing. This is billions of little things working in unity to create the one thing. That's perpetual. And as they die every day and we wash away the dead cells, they're renewed and give birth to themselves every day that you don't even realize you've washed away millions of dead aspects of yourself that is being renewed, and every few days you're renewing your whole body. Every few weeks we are a new body, constantly renewing itself. When the total organism collapses because of overuse, it goes back to the mineral that it came from in the beginning. The water evaporates and goes to the sky. It comes back down in rain. We drink the water that comes from all those dead bodies without even thinking about it. And that aspect of you that rot in the ground before they start putting us in metal boxes and steel boxes become the fertilizer for the very plant that you ingest and eat to continue your cycle of life, eternal and forever. That's African culture, African sacred science in just one aspect, looking at their, what's the word I use again? It's getting old, you forget things. Reincarnation process. And every African culture explains it in a similar way, you know. And people say, well, what about God? He. There's no African that call a God he. Africans don't even call one another he. Sometimes I may be called a she by somebody in the household. I may be called, the woman may be called he. It depends on the role and function you're carrying out at the time that someone say something to you about something, you know. There's no God who is a he, and there's no God who is a she. In the African concept, God is every and all things at once, including you. You're an aspect of that every and all things at once. The space between you and I that is perceived to be nothingness have billions of microorganisms living full lives right in front of our faces, and we can't even see them. But we know they're there because we can breathe them in, and if our system is broken down and weak, when we breathe them in, they'll make us sick, and we call that an infection, you know. But normally, we're swimming in the sea of living creatures without being conscious of the living creatures that make up what we call the air that we breathe to keep us alive. Because all of us are part of this one organism called the divine, according to African culture.
How does the moon and solar eclipses, all right, start from the top. How does the moon and solar eclipses impact people's spiritual experiences?
Well, the first thing I'm going to tell you, I'm not the master of everything. I don't think I'm the master of anything, to tell you the truth. But my little 5-year-old, when she got off the bus that day, and I went to my granddaughter, and she said, Grandpa, take my glass and look at the solar eclipse. We were watching the solar eclipse, and I did look at it for about 2 minutes. It was an extraordinary phenomenon to see. But the fact that the shifting of the amount of energy hitting us directly from the sun, we saw the earthquake hit New York. We saw the weather phenomena across the world. We saw even human behavior around the world. Some things got altered there. Does our scientists, or are our scientists equipped to do a study of that? Or are they so misinformed that they're not allowed, or not allowing themselves to do a study of what was the impact on the human being? What was the impact on the ecology because of the eclipse that just took place? The animals know it was an impact. I remember when that earthquake hit that morning, and I'm sitting in my office, and I thought someone had picked my house up, shook it, and moved it over. And when I ran downstairs to my wife, she was running for the front door. She said, "You heard all of that?" And I go like, "Yeah, I think we just had an earthquake, you know." But I said, we just had the eclipse. And then after that, you had the extraordinary flood in Dubai, totally unheard of. No one could have imagined that could happen, but it happened, you know. And we've seen all kinds of weather phenomena. We're going through one right now with the deep freeze across America right now in the middle of spring. But yet it's not being discussed in terms of cosmology and ecology, or the effect that the cosmology is now having on the ecology of the earth. But I believe that our ancestors saw, understood the replication of this through many times, and tried to explain it in their sacred science in all kinds of motifs, you know. I was just at one of my shrines, my parents' shrine, which is in Trinidad. It's called the Kenny Cyrus Kibalan Ile Jube. And it's in a place called Chiguanas, just outside of Port of Spain. And it came to that place from Caracou some centuries ago. And it came to Caracou, well, not quite a centuries, but many, many decades ago. And it came to Caracou from Haiti after the death of Dessalines, when so many of the practitioners of voodoo left Haiti because the Catholic Church and the new mulatto regime turned against them. And so my shrine is a place of worship where we go to interface and interact with the forces of nature that we call the powers of the gods or the deities, and to communicate with those elements in sacred ways and sacred spaces, to cleanse ourselves and to protect ourselves and those kinds of things by having a closer relationship with that emanation of energy. And I can find that anywhere in the Caribbean. I can go to Jamaica and tell you just where to go, where we need to go today, so we can get back on that plane and go home better, you know? I can do the same thing when I go to Ghana in a few weeks. Because our sacred science haven't died. We've been forced under duress to marginalize how we present ourselves publicly. But in some places, like I love Trinidad, where you can present yourself publicly in the African tradition without being ridiculed and abused by the society. They have a Shango Day in Trinidad. They have a day for the spiritual Baptists, which is another manifestation. They have a national holiday for the spiritual Baptists in Trinidad. You see? And so we know that when you fight to be who you are, the social order would have to give way. Even though one of the things that they've done is to try and keep us from understanding how Africa is united. We're united with our understanding of the sacred science. That the sacred science is the same thing in Chad as it is in Ivory Coast. It's the same thing in Egypt as it is in South Africa. You don't have to speak the same language to practice the sacred science, okay? And we are known by who we are, not what we say.
Please explain how our use of words assist in our mental bondage, right? For example, should we be using the word diaspora to identify African people who do not live on the continent?
Should we use the word diaspora to identify African people who do not live on the continent? It depends on what you want to say. The word diaspora simply means disperse, those who have dispersed from their original space, right? Originally, we were on the continent of Africa, but there have been multiple dispersals. We sometimes now think that the word diaspora speaks only to those who were forcibly brought over here in the genocidal process called the transatlantic slave trade. But that's a very late dispersal. There had been multiple other dispersals over hundreds of thousands of years about people migrating out of Africa into Australia, into New Guinea, into India, into Europe. Those too were dispersals. And those personages and those remnants which are still found in many of those places of African people can still be referred to as diasporans, meaning those who have dispersed from here. So it's not a contradictory term, okay? It's you're trying to describe the relocation of some people. You're not even describing when they relocated or the process of relocation. We're still Africans, but many of us have been dispersed when we're trying to talk about Africa as the foundation and the base, and we're no longer living there because there's been a dispersal for some reason, voluntarily dispersal, what we call immigration. Immigration is a dispersal, a dispersing. Ancient immigration, hundreds of thousands of years ago when we marched into Asia, Europe, and South America and the Pacific, that's a diaspora, that's a dispersal. People only use diaspora to refer to the most recent dispersal that came as a result of the transatlantic slave trade. But a dispersal means just that, a dispersal of a population from one place to the other. And we want to identify that population as belonging to the place from which they left. You know, so I don't think it's a negative word, because we can always use the word African when we want to describe what diaspora are we talking about. Are we talking about Chinese diasporans, or are we talking about African diasporans? Because the African diasporans have certain rights, but those rights are in Africa. The Chinese diasporans have certain rights, but those rights are in China. As long as we are clear on identity, identity becomes the key. Dr. Asa Hilliard told us that the greatest freedom is to be shackled to your identity. So if the greatest freedom one can have is to be shackled to your identity, whether you're referred to as that aspect that's in the diaspora or that aspect that is still at home. It is the identity that both of you are shackled to, the common identity that determines the unity, you see. And so that becomes important. With identity become cultural practices, sacred science, behavior, and beliefs.
Why is the rate of depression in Africa
Right.
lower than the rates in Europe and America?
The rate of depression in Africa is lower, and that's really an easy one. They're not under the same socio-economic and political pressures as we are. They're under different sets of pressures in economic, political, and social. But one of the things they don't have to, respond to or explain to anyone that they're Africans. If I live in Jamaica, I say I'm a Jamaican, but then I've got to somehow figure out a way to let that mean I'm an African too. When I'm in America, we used to call ourselves Negro and colors, and then we decide to start calling ourselves Afro-Americans and then African-Americans as a way of saying, I'm not an American wholly. America is a geopolitical place. I'm an African wholly. That's a racial space. That's a culture space. That's a spiritual space. And so, but on the continent, you don't have to say that because you're in your geopolitical space, you're in your cultural space, you're in your racial space. You don't have to explain that to yourself. Here, we've got to explain it to ourselves because there's another cultural space here, there's another political space here, there's another racial space here that's not African. So, and we're trying to function within that space with the other space being the dominant factor. And so we're constantly under duress, stress, and pressure to perform in a partnership that one of the partners won't allow to be legitimate. And yet we're fighting constantly for that legitimacy, that human beingness legitimacy in the context of a social order and a social ecology that's being determined not by the two parties, but by one party. And it's putting us under a lot of stress because the other party who's making the determination is then telling us, why aren't you self-determining? While at the same time, he's got the power to make the decisions of the degree of your determinations that can be made. You don't have to do that on the continent. You know, you wake up in the morning, you smell Africa, you hear Africa, you taste Africa, you speak Africa, you go and look at your door and you see Africa. And you have a rhythm with nature that Africa has designed. Over here we have a rhythm with nature that an abusive, oppressive, backwards, ignorant, non-civilized person have designed. And we are forced to try to be human within the context of that. That's very hard to do. And it puts you under a lot of stress every day here, the UK, Germany, France, wherever we find our people.
And I know, like, the older I get and the more I learn about my body, I know people speak about eating a lot. They speak about being active. But I don't think enough focus is put on being mentally healthy or how being mentally unhealthy can destroy your body. And I think that's what a lot of brothers and sisters are suffering from. Just being mentally unhealthy.
Very unhealthy because
destroys the body.
We're not in a culture that emphasizes mental health. Matter of fact, we're in a culture that ostracizes those who they recognize to be mentally unhealthy instead of trying to create a process to heal those who are mentally unhealthy. And nor do we have in place instruments to avoid the mental unhealthiness. We've created a medicine, a medical practice around mental health that has to do with medicating and not mitigating. See, to mitigate is to find methodology to solve the problem or to remove the things that's causing the mental distress. But instead we give medicine that covers, masks the mental distress, but not the cause of the mental distress. And it gets replicated in everyday activity in the society we're in. And so people in America, most of us are mentally ill. It's a culture that allows for mental illness to be a dominant factor because it's so much easier to rule the masses that are mentally dysfunctional. Even at the level where you think your dysfunction is normal in America, you may find mentally you're very unhealthy. We are so unhealthy, we don't even know how to eat good food. Go and look in the supermarket and read the packets of what we eat every day. It is poison, 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 obvious poison. Toxins, 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 obvious toxins, and yet we race in and buy it every day, ingest it every day, without thinking about it. Just that. In the African sacred science system, the body is the temple in which God the divine must live and reside. So then it should be the foundational institution to be kept healthy. One cannot say I'm spiritually healthy if the physical body is not healthy. But we're in a culture that says you can say I'm spiritual healthy, even if your physical body is crippled, and you can at the same time be constantly crippling it with alcohol, with tobacco, with bad food, with toxins, and you'll still praise the spiritual being that you're putting this into this contaminated, toxic temple and asking it to function. So it must become a distortion of its own self in order to function outside of that toxic, distorted temple that it's housed in. And when you articulate it, when you try to use words to describe yourself or it, we avoid using words that will identify the contaminant or identify the toxin or identify the negative action, because the ruling elite that's imposing that as the cultural social order will not allow for you to go unpunished if you try to do that. I hope that made sense. I'm trying to make it as simple as it could be. You know?
Did you and Khalid Muhammad ever speak about his legendary appearance on Phil Donahue in 1994?
I don't know if Khalid and I spoke about his. I think I was in the audience that day. I mean, we spent a lot of time together during that period of time. I don't think we spoke specifically about that show. We spoke about those things all the time. You know, the Kane College event when he got into the conflict with his leader, Minister Farrakhan, for talking about lifting the Pope's dress. And I was with him that night. Later in Baltimore, when the night he found out he had been suspended, I was with him that night. The Friday night, the Saturday night before his death on that Tuesday, we were together that night. The night of the Million Youth March, the security brigade that protected him that day was trained in my basement. I mean, that's how close we were.
The question I have is, like, how did he prepare for speaking engagements where he had a lot of interaction with the audience? Because I really observed like his ability to reply. Mm-hmm. Also observed his breath control, much like a musical artist in a sense.
Well, you have to be self-disciplined, and you have to know your truth, and you have to have faith in your truth. You've got to know that it doesn't matter where you are, truth is truth. Who you're up against, your ability and your skills to tell the truth without losing the moral high ground is determined by the manner in which you present, you know, your ideas, concepts, and principles. And he was a master. He was a master at that, because he understood that those who were anti-nature, and the definition of a sin, you know, is the act of being anti-natural, okay? And the definition of the doer of anti-natural acts is devil. And it's amazing if you study some of this stuff, how it would just wake you up to simple little things that allow you to understand. So I know when I sit down anywhere with my enemy, I know who he's come to destroy because I know what I am. But I know who's come to destroy me because I know who they are. And then everything else is easy. You can't get past this. Okay? Khalid was a master. He knew who he was. He knew his role in nature. He understood who he was up against. Phil Donahue to others may have been a celebrity, but to Khalid he was just a white man with white ideas, white concepts, and white principles based on European misinformation of reality. He knew that going in, that nothing else could come from Phil but that. And I knew Mr. Donahue. I did his shows a couple of times myself. He was a very nice, amiable man, but he was instructed and informed by Eurocentric philosophical understanding of the most basic human realities, and he couldn't get beyond that.
How did you guys get on the show back then?
We were the light in the world, and everybody was trying to, okay, these lights are out here. The white folks were trying to figure, what is that? The Leonard Jeffries, the Minister Farrakhan, the Khalid Muhammad. I was the youngster in the group, the James Small. We were saying things and speaking a truth that since Malcolm no one had heard. And they thought they'd killed a certain truth in killing Dr. King and killing Malcolm. They thought they had silenced a consciousness, and yet that consciousness manifested in multiple ways to black men and women. And they wanted to try to catch up with it. Where's it coming from? Who are these people? They didn't bring us there to entertain them. They brought us there to have an opportunity for their people to see this thing exists in your space. Be aware. And to find out the other thing, where did they come from? Who are they? How are they getting informed? What is the basis of this information? In short, take me to your leader kind of thing, you know? They didn't understand the leader is God. You don't have to take him, God's everywhere. You want to go to my leader? Introspect. Look inside of yourself.
And when you went on the show, did they prepare you with topics, or you just went on there and started?
No, they would tell you the topic, but they would not do what you do in terms of giving you bullet points to let you know what they were going to ask. They'll tell you what the basic topic is. Most of the time, they didn't stay to it. Most of the time, it was entrapment. Most of the time, they lied about the topic, but the idea was, can I get them here, beat down their truth in front of white America so that that truth does not resonate to either black or white America. So when they jump on Khalid Muhammad, it was a big mistake.
And it seemed like it backfired, because especially by allowing, uneducated people in the crowd to talk. It wasn't a good look.
I remember Sister Phyllis Stickney stood up, and Phyllis just read the riot act. It was so beautiful. You know who Sister Stickney is? She's an actress, extraordinary actress. I spoke to her a few weeks ago. And she at that time was dating. She and Khalid was dating. When you watch the Donahue show, there's a woman with an African hair wrap on. That's Sister Phyllis Stickney.
All right,
she's a heck of an actor, both on Broadway and in Hollywood. But because of her African nature, she doesn't get the roles, she should get. But Phyllis, that black woman gets up from the audience and just reads the riot act to those people. Some white man said something silly, and Phyllis just wiped him out. And she wasn't college. She wasn't a trained minister. She was just a citizen of the black community who was conscious and had the courage to express herself with a truth. We went into those places with an African truth of humanity's beingness. This is who we are. You want to call me a slave? That's on you. You want to call me the N-word? That's on you. To me, I'm none of those things. I never was any of those things all the years you called me those things. I've laughed at you because you were a child, not knowing who you were talking to, and still don't know who you're talking to. Right now, a lot of the shows that I've done, there's a beautiful platform called Pan-African Daily TV that was being broadcast out of Germany. And for 2 years, we lit up the world. PLO Lumumba, Joshua Mpango, myself, Baino Bello. But now Europe has said, no, we can't have this. So they've shut it down, They said, we cannot have this kind of truth about politics, this kind of truth about economics, this kind of truth about culture, this kind of truth about spirituality being a normal expression coming from Africans to even our people? No, 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 no. And it's putting our lives, it's exposing our lives, it's exposing the lives of Europeans. Even the European people are so misinformed and negatively indoctrinated that their humanity is called to question by their own social order. And when you and I come on the scene to talk about the truth that should prevail between human beings, no matter what race or culture you're coming from, the powers that be are afraid of that, because you cannot exploit a united people. You can only exploit a disunited humanity. And so they do the best they can to keep humanity disunited. One of the key elements to keeping humanity disunited is to have the trendsetter, the model setter, quieted, and that's the African voice. The African voice that refused to die under any circumstances you've placed it. You know, that refused to betray the divine humanity that we're part of. And that's what they want to silence. That the truth of God uses us as a primary conduit to express itself in the human ecology and in the human environment. And they want to silence that. And what you saw that day with Khalid Muhammad on Donahue was a mistake in trying to silence that with a prince of the divine standing in front of them, knowing well who he was as an African man.
How would Trump re-election impact America and specifically the black community?
Well, Trump's re-election would... America's not a good country, even without Trump. America's now overseeing with money and guns and missiles the genocide of a helpless, harmless people in a concentration camp called Gaza. It's like shooting fish in a bowl, except in this case you're shooting 50 million men and women and children, mainly women and children. And our government is overseeing that. And every time our president opens his mouth, he says how much he supports, the undying supports he has for those who are committing that genocide. What is happening in Gaza right now is the greatest genocide since the Third Reich and Hitler in Germany in the 1940s. And I want to say that again. What is happening in the concentration camp called Gaza, that's maintained by the state of Israel, the United States, Britain, and France. It's not just Israel. It's the United States, Britain, and France that maintains the concentration camp called Gaza. And now they've gone to that concentration camp to commit genocide in the same way Hitler did in Auschwitz, Dachau, Buchenwald, and the other camps in Germany in the 1940s. They didn't just kill the Jews. They killed millions of Afro-Germans as well. Nobody talk about them. They sterilized millions of Afro-German men, even before they started in on the Jews, you know. And so, and they killed millions of gypsies also. Nobody cries for them. That awful genocide that Hitler committed, what's going on in Gaza today is the closest thing to that has ever happened since the 1940s. And our government, under the current president, and under the president before him and before him, is fully participant in that process. I wanted to get that out first because when we talk about Trump, it's like Trump's going to come in and destabilize something. America's not run by the managers. Let's get that clear. Presidents are managers with management styles. Trump doesn't have any power as the president. If he steps out of line, the managers will do to him what they did to John Kennedy, Abraham Lincoln, Garfield, and Harrison, and the other presidents. America has assassinated more of its president than any other country in the Western Hemisphere. Were you aware of that? Most people aren't. Arthur, Harrison, Garfield, Kennedy's brother who would have been president, Abraham Lincoln, 5 to 7, I think, of them was assassinated. No other nation in modern times in the Western world have ever assassinated. No two nations has ever assassinated that many of their presidents. Yet we don't talk about it, right? And so anyone, if the Biden step out of line, his bosses will eliminate him as easily as those same bosses eliminated Kennedy. It was the government of the United States that killed President Kennedy. Just like the government killed Malcolm X and the government killed Martin Luther King and multiple others that weren't as famous as they were. So these managers, Trump problem isn't what he will do with the government, because who sits on his cabinet, that won't be decided by him. That'll be decided by some right-wing think tank. Like under Obama, you had everything that he did was a platform given to him by the Heritage Society. See, in different ones of these right-wing think tanks, they hire these managers. We vote the managers in for them to give some false legitimacy of democracy. But there's no democracy here, because the people who give them the agenda to be carried is the 1% of the 1%. And if they do not carry that agenda, they won't be in any percent. I just want to get that straight first. So Trump's childish, backwards, buffoonish personality is irrelevant to how the country will run, okay? How he will use his buffoonery, his backwards, ill-informed, uneducated, ignorant self in expressing social relationship between the population of America, especially the poor whites, who they're bleeding and abusing worse in some cases than they're doing black people. But they must convince the poor whites that it's not the ruling elite that's treating them this way, that somehow you're being treated this way because of black people, brown people, and yellow people. That's where he's dangerous. That then these poor white people, most of them are not college educated. Most of them are not intellectually educated. They're marginalized, sub-working class. And it is that class that made up the Ku Klux Klan and the White Knights and the murderers that carried out the terrorism for 100 years after the Civil War against the African American population. It is that class that danger will come to the average non-white person in this country, even though the state will stop it at some point, but they will never totally eradicate it, because they use that tyranny coming from their marginalized, underemployed, uneducated whites to keep black educated people in check from trying to create a platform of government and social ecology that would be worthy to call itself a democracy.
So it sounds like you're saying what this other gentleman we recently interviewed, Daryl Davis, he was mentioning, I believe it's 2042, he was saying at that point, I guess white people in America officially be the minority. And
they're probably the minority already.
Yeah, but they're just not saying
But
that.
they're still the ruling elite. They're the minority in terms of genetic construct. American whites have been at minus birth rate for some decades now. All of Europe is at minus birth rate, meaning they're producing naturally less children than is dying naturally, right? Greece is in real trouble in that regards right now. They've even put that in the newspapers because it's so bad. But that's the Greek illusion in thinking they're whites. The rest of the Germanic white world don't think Greeks are white, but it's just the Greeks think they're white. And that term white, just started being used after 1619, emanating here from America to describe the European community. And that's the white is the same to Europeans as Pan-Africanism is to Africans. You understand? Say that again. Whites being white to Europeans is the same thing as Pan-Africanism is to Africans. And if we get that, we'll understand how to deal with that as we confront it. So Trump, his policy, he won't make the foreign policy. He can articulate little stupid lines for people to laugh at and joke with, but the actual foreign policy of this nation will be negotiated by those foundations and think tank and research groups that work for the 1% of the 1%. And if he gets in the way of that, he won't be any percent.
There are two things I want to add with this police vibe. One is that, one, a lot of the brothers don't identify as being a brother despite their skin tone. And also, too, man, it's just like these police aren't trained to be police. A lot of these police officers have no business being police. And I think that's one of the reasons for their actions. They're just not trained.
I think
to be in that position.
poor training is one of the reasons, but most police departments, especially in the big cities, they get really good training. You're dealing with cowards. You're dealing with cowards that have no respect for the citizens in which they're supposed to protect. You're dealing with, and when I deal with the black men and women, you're dealing with cowards who would sit there and know that this other being from some other ethnic group is abusing a black man or woman, and you try to, and I watched them move. I've seen something like you're almost divorced from what's going on right there. Instance, when I lived on 148th in Amsterdam, I was going through the store and there was a ruckus. There was a lady, she was a bag lady, a homeless lady. And I turned the corner and they had her handcuffed and she was on the ground in the gutter. And a black man had his foot on this black woman's head. I walk over to this black man and I told him, why are you doing this? Oh, she's gonna bite us. How could she bite you? She handcuffed. This is a black woman. I don't care if she's homeless, stinking or whatever. You got your foot on her head. So I went to the sergeant who was a white woman. And I complained to the white woman sergeant that this black man has got his foot on the head of a woman, a black woman in the gutter. And she said, well, she's ruling. How's she going to be? She's laying on the ground handcuffed. That putting the foot on the head was a statement of her nothingness. And that black man wanted to identify with the white people's making that statement. He wanted to show them that I feel as you do about her nothingness. I witnessed that on the for real. You know, I remember once I had to take, this is a long time ago, I had to take the weapons of a police and walk to his precinct and put his weapons on the desk. I don't know why this person killed. But anyway, I got away with it.
What was that situation since you brought it up?
There was an incident on 125th Street and he was messing with a pregnant woman, bullying her for some reason. And me and a couple other brothers were coming and we disarmed him. And I took his equipment to his precinct and told them all I brought it there. They was all looking like I was insane and I left, you know. Later, some people came and talked to me, but I had friends too. Because my thing is very simple. If you could put me to sleep, I could put you to sleep. You got family that love you, I got family that loves me. And you can't scare them by harming me, you know. If those black men and women who wear the uniform of the police across the country would ask the question of, how did I get this opportunity to wear this uniform? And if they had the decency, to show some appreciation to the poor people who march in the street, the working class don't march, they had work. The working class don't sit in, they had work. It is the underemployed and the unemployed, the poor people, the most impoverished, who's begging for change, that demonstrate for change, cause change, even at a cost to themselves. And then you, with the little degrees, take advantage of the change and disdain the very people who caused the conditions that brought about the change, that gave you an opportunity to be law enforcement in the black community. And then my Latino brothers and sisters, who paid no price at all for civil rights in America, getting all of the opportunity afforded from our struggle as Africans in the streets of America, and you're one of the most brutal respondents when you come into the black community? God bless the Black Liberation Army, God bless the Black Panther Party, God bless the Hoodoo fighters, God bless the International Commandos. In the 60s, we told you we didn't tolerate you. that way. And the young people, if you want to do anything, do what I told you. Join the military. It's better than joining a gang killing your people on the streets and on the corner. Come back home and take these positions to run your community. That's what others are doing. That is the pathway they're using. I was in the military. It didn't make me anti-African. My father was in the military. He's one of the best union organizers in this city. He was not anti-Africans. Two of my brothers were in the military. They didn't come back home anti-Africans. My uncle and father fought in the Second World War, one in the Pacific and one in Germany. They were the most African organizers in South Carolina that I know. So don't tell me that somehow going in the military is equated with being anti-African. That's stupid. You live in America. If you can't serve in the military, that should be the same reason why you ought to pack your bag and leave America. Why won't you leave? It's not, Africa is only a plane ticket away. You know? It's only a plane ticket away. So stop lying to yourselves. Stop playing. Stop being cowards. I'm talking to black men now. Stop being cowards. Stop lying to yourself. Stop pretending that you don't know what's going on because you don't have the courage to take the responsibility to save your people. But you got the courage to go on the street and pull a knife. You got the courage to go on the street and pull a gun and shoot your peer without even a logical reason for the argument that led to the gunshot. You know, join the Navy, join the Army, join the Marines, learn how to fight, learn how to be a soldier, learn how to use a weapon, then come back home and take over the apparatus like the police department, the sheriff department, the fire departments in the communities you live in. Then you won't have to complain about nobody else. But if you're not doing that, you're just a lying little coward that's afraid to be a man when the opportunity has been given to you to follow the pathway to that kind of manhood so you can do what Malcolm X said. Stop calling Malcolm's name if you're not willing to do what he said. Malcolm said, black nationalism means taking control of the economic, politics, and culture where you live. If you're not doing that, keep your mouth shut. Don't put on no black beret. Don't put on no red, black, and green flag, because that's meaningless unless you're trying to take control of the economic, the politics, and the culture where you live. And he says to do that, you got to take control of the land, labor, and resources where you live. Okay? And so that's the only way you can guarantee food, clothing, shelter, and safety for your family and your brothers' family and sisters' families and friends' families. And I'm telling you, if you live in the United States of America, one of the biggest pathways to that is to join the military and spend 2 years of training on how to be a man. Because I tell you, I was in the military. They'll train you. You're going to get up in the morning at 4 o'clock and you're going to be out there running and exercising and getting your body in physical shape. You're going to learn the rules of engagement, how to defend yourself, how to fight yourself. You're going to learn hand-to-hand combat, and you're going to learn weapons. All right? But you also have an opportunity to pick a profession when you're in there, too. You go to schools. You can be an engineer, scientist, any profession you want. You can be in radio, television. They teach all of this stuff in the military. And you can come back home and make a living for yourself. And it also puts you at the top of the food chain in civil service. It means you get at the top level of getting into the post office before someone who have not been in the military. You get at the top level for getting in the police department, the fire department, etc. Okay? Another civil service job. Why are you afraid to take this responsibility? You've let this enemy beat you down. We know he beat us down. He beat you down. He beat me down. But you got to rise up out of that ashes of the beat down. And whatever pathway is there for you to get to where you have to go, you've got to use that pathway. I'm telling you the pathway that's there for you, because the pathway you're using ain't working.
What happened in your analysis, like between your I believe you're my father's age, so like your generation, right? What happened with the men, with the militancy, the fire, the courage?
I mean, because the youth that came after us, they were beat down psychologically. That's why I'm speaking about what I'm speaking about. I know the beat down. They took control. We had more of the curricula in the schools then than you have now. all right? So you didn't have the TV and the cell phone and all of these other socializing instruments.
Burning out your brain.
That not burning out your brain, but socializing it with your, socialization means how you get your values, your interests, and your principle. Pretty much the child was in the control of two instruments, the household and the school. Now the school and the household are both outweighed by the telephone, the television, the computer, and other instruments in terms of how you're getting values, interests, and principle, and what other elements is bombarding your brain. And then you got the larger social ecology that has changed the value system on about what a male is, what a female is, what responsibilities are. Look at who we have running for president. Here we are in the United States of America with some of the best colleges ever set up in the universe, black or whites. And all we've got to run for president is two nearly 80-year-old senile white racist men. Where's all the men, black and white? Where's the youth of America? Where's all the women? The Me Too movement and the woman movement, where are they running for the presidency of the United States? You got two senile racists. One racist who's being cool and quiet because he needs the black vote, and the other racist not giving a damn about the black vote. That's what we got. That's the reality. Nothing personal, Mr. Biden. Your history speaks for itself. The dance you had to do and the jig you had to do the last few years to get my votes, that's not your history towards my people. You know? I'm a friend of Butch Lewis, so if you hear this tape, you know what I mean when I say I'm a friend of Butch Lewis. Right? He was right there from Chester, Pennsylvania, living in your Delaware, you know? Black businessman that knew who all of you were. And Mr. Trump, I'm from New York. I saw what you did with the young brothers from the Central Park murder, the innocent young men, and even when they were proven innocent, you as the president didn't have the dignity or the integrity to apologize or even say you made a mistake. See, you backwards little being that have money that comes from the thievery of your kind and use that as a measure of your manhood. Please give it everybody, but those who value you and want to vote for you tells me what the value system of so many white males in America are. They all want to be you. You know, they want to be the profane, anti-woman, anti-human being that you are. And so look at what we've got to vote for. That is so pathetic. The world is laughing at America. Wait a minute, you have nearly 200 million people. And this is all you could produce for your leadership? You have some of the finest universities in the world. Some of the greatest intellects in the world of all races. And this is all you can present to yourselves, let alone to the world. This is sad. Both of them should decline to run for office out of respect for the nation and the Constitution. But neither one have that level of integrity.
What do you view as the future of America?
The young people are waking up. They'll get off of the drugs eventually. They've been drugged by their own fathers for the sake of money. No drug cartel can function without the role of government. I don't care whether they're selling heroin or oxycodone. If the government wants it stopped, it'll be stopped like that. But as long as that allows them to control the possible pathways to leadership by the youth, white, black, or Asian, then they will allow it to happen. So that their power and the handful that they want to keep coming to power, to keep them in power, will remain constant. So all you can tell the people, wake up, unite yourself, All politics is local. All politics is local. Take control of your school board. Take control of your community area board. Take control of your city council. Take control of your mayoralty. If you take control of those, you can control your police and your fire. Then take control of your state, and then you know how to take control of your national. All politics is local. But you can't leave it to those who are professional politicians, who are a bunch of money-grubbing collaborators who think getting elected to office guarantees them a job for life. And in the black community, almost every black politician we know gets a job for life, no matter how poor their performance are. And we have to stop that. You got 2 years to perform, and if you don't perform, we will remove you. 2 years to perform. You do not have a job for life anymore. We will remove the collaborators and the cowards who would sit and vote on anti-human and genocidal behavior by other people for the sake of you getting a paycheck and privileges to sit with the robber barons of America and of the American people. You know, that's the reality.
Professor Smalls, thank you for the master class. You don't hear the word master class. Thank you again for the master class. Serious thing, you know?
Well, I'm always happy. You know, I met you and I go, this is a beautiful young brother. He got a good perspective. He knows how to interview. We discuss things leading up to here. You never know where you're going, even when you ask the question in an interview. I saw how you present the other information that we put together. It was beautifully done. Everybody that saw it thought it was beautifully done. And so I'm happy with that. And I'm happy to get an opportunity to tell people the truth on a medium that would get the truth to people. I'm not anti anybody. I love God. And if I see God in you, I'll love you too, whether you're white, Asian, black, Latino. I love the God in you. So if you want me to love you, come with the God in you and have the God in you foster relationship with the God in me. Then love becomes real. But I don't want to be attracted by you and attached to you and dependent on you and not be loved by you.
Mm-hmm. We were speaking earlier that we were talking about the black household, right? And the information circulating that majority of black households are single parent households. But then you brought up a great point saying divorce rate is so high in the white community, so they have a high rate of single parent households also. And I was saying that despite that though, the ability to earn, that's the problem between the white household and the black household.
Well, don't make it the ability to earn.
Access.
The opportunity to earn and access to earning. Because if it came to ability, we'd be ahead of the food chain.
Access to earning. Right.
An income that allows you to run a household, providing the food, clothing, shelter, safety, security that the household needs. That's where the black community is being hurt. And a big part of what's hurting the black community in that regards is the heavy immigrant population that's rolling into the country now, which is beyond any pale of immigration. No one let millions of people across their border every month. Nowhere in the world, ever in the history of the world. So what is that about? After the 60s, when they couldn't defeat us politically, we won the voting rights. We were voting. They can't say black people don't vote, because if we didn't vote, you wouldn't get Obama twice. If we didn't vote, you wouldn't have Biden in the office, all right? If we didn't vote, you wouldn't have had Clinton in the office twice. That's black votes that made all of that happen. So the myth of the black person not voting, even after getting the voting franchise, is just a myth. They may want us to vote a larger percentage to vote, but a larger percentage, how much of the Latino community vote? But you ever hear anybody says Latinos don't vote? How many of the Asian community vote? But do you ever hear anybody say Asians don't vote? How much of the German community don't vote? But you never hear nobody say the German community don't vote. Why is this constant attack on the black community? Because you want to commit crimes against them and have them responsible for the crimes you commit against them. And so after the 60s, when you couldn't defeat us with the vote, we defeated you. You couldn't defeat us with a lot of the legalisms that came into labor laws that said you had to give us employment. So the way you defeated it, said we're going to bring another employable population in the country that not going to ask for those labor laws to be enforced. And put your butt on the sideline, put you on the unemployment line. And then we're not going to give you unemployment. That's what happened in America, big time across America. It hit me one day, and I'm driving Highway 13, going to Virginia to see my kids. I had 3 of them in Hampton at the time. And Carol and I, and we just working class people who just got up first, both of us in our family, a first generation to go to college. But all of our children have at least a master's degree and some PhDs, and 2 are working on PhDs, because we understood what that meant. And we're not the only family that did that. From the Caribbean and the US, almost all of us in my generation were first generation going to college, and our kids went to college, right? You think the powers that be didn't see that and realize that one generation down the road, that's the ruling class. Now, how do we stop that upward growth? You got to cut off the ability to get the income to send a child to school, all right, so that they can go to college and so they can move to the next level and put their children in college. But one of the ways they did this was to flood the country with, mainly the brothers and sisters came from Central South America. We call everybody that speaks Spanish Latino, but the Spanish-speaking community is not homogenous. Those who are Puerto Ricans are not a part of that community that's coming out of Honduras and Nicaragua and those places. And all of these countries are countries that America controls economically, politically, and has overthrown every government down there. And almost every government except the one in, Nicaragua, is under American control to this day. Much of South America is under American control. They couldn't get Venezuela, you know. They have, to some degree, this government in Brazil, even though with this new guy coming back in the government, he's still working as a part of that group that's controlling Haiti. You know, he still goes along with that program. So they've brought in an alternative. See, you got to go back to the Civil Rights Act of '65, all right, because it's dealing with a lot of the labor and employment issues in America for black people. It's removing all of the discrimination that's blocking us from getting work and getting jobs in the different institutions. And so they said, okay, we'll bring in a population that's not going to ask for union, they're not going to ask for insurance, because they're in jeopardy. If they open their mouth, I take the green card away. If they open their mouth, I will deport them. And they're just poor people just like us, who are trying to make a living to feed their family, clothe their family, and have a better life for their family. But they got something over their head they can't put over the head of the black American. But what they can do to you is make sure you're not in the marketplace, that the marketplace is still being filled with labor, but it won't be you. And it worked, because it happened so subtly. And I remember one day I was going down Highway 13 to visit my children at Hampton for the weekend, me and my wife. And I saw one of the big farm trucks. And all of a sudden I saw no blacks. So going down, I didn't say nothing about it. But when we're coming back up 17, all the farms along the eastern seaboard, I see the same thing. I see all the men on the back of the farm trucks, but I don't see no black folks. And that happened within a 2-year period, where those trucks were full of black laborers, and then 2 years later, not a single black laborer could be seen in those fields. Because have you ever driven 13 down south? It's just farms after farms after farms for hundreds of miles, right? And the black laborer was gone. And then you saw the same thing in the city. When I moved up to New Rochelle out of Harlem, New York, all of the yards were being done by black, what do you call it when you do the lawn and, landscapers and garden. There's not a single black company in New Rochelle any longer. And all of the companies you see today are made up of younger brothers and sisters, or even if the elder brothers and sisters, who are part of the new immigrant group that have come from Central South America. Now, I'm not trying to put them down. I'm trying to let's be clear that I understand what this immigration thing about, because you change the category that anybody can cross your border. I'm not talking about the people who come through the border, presents their paper. You got corridors for that. That's not how most people are coming into America. Most people are coming to America by skirting that process. You used to call them illegal immigrants. Now you refer to them as asylum seekers. What asylum? What is going on in their country that they're seeking asylum from that the Haitians isn't seeking asylum from? But you turn the Haitian boat back and send them to drown at sea. You beat them with whips and riding on horses, and you put them on a plane and fly them back to Haiti. They have a worse asylum situation than any place in Central South America. So this isn't about asylum seekers. This is about moving a black working class from the working underclass out of the marketplace. Because anytime you get trouble, anytime you get demonstrations, that's the class that's doing it. It's not the middle class, it's not the upper class, it's the working class and the underclass, the lumpen proletariats. They're clear on that in America. We showed them that in the 60s, and they said this will never happen again. We will destroy the lumpen proletariat class and put you under our feet, and we'll use drugs to keep you down, and the police to enforce that. And we'll replace you in the marketplace. You'll no longer be the restaurant workers. You'll no longer be the cooks in the restaurant. You'll no longer be the doorman downtown Manhattan. Yes, it all happened so subtly, but look and see who was there. When I was there, when my mom worked down on 77th Street, I saw who the workers were. Now they're sitting on corners, can't getting jobs. Okay? So their job is to sell the drugs that the intelligence apparatus allowed to come in this country through Haiti and other places, which is the big conduit for that, for the cartels, drugs. Drugs is a multi-billion-dollar business, okay? It is, we prove Oliver North and General Secord, and they're flying the drugs into Arkansas National Guard base while Clinton was the governor to buy guns from Iran to give to the Contras to destroy the Nicaraguan revolution. If that didn't tell us our government role in it, that role never ended. And it's all tied into the inner city black community in terms of how you destroy a community, especially the males in a community. But you still need workers, so what do you do when you destroy your working population at the bottom level? You import another working population to do that. And of course that population is a deprived people, hungry people, starving people, trying to become somebody people, so you can't blame the victim. But at some point the victim got to realize, I can't sit by and continue to collaborate voluntarily or involuntarily with my enemy without my responding to your doing it, because you have as much common sense as I do. You see what's going on.
What's your thoughts on Haiti?
Haiti?
Yeah.
Haiti is one of the greatest atrocities that black people from the Caribbean, from CARICOM, and the Black Caucus has ever allowed to be committed against black people in this hemisphere. The crime of the U.S. government against Haiti is being collaborated upon by the CARICOM leadership and the Black Caucus in the United States Congress. Haiti is one of the wealthiest islands in the Caribbean. There's not a single island in the Caribbean that has Haiti's wealth, no one. And yet it's as impoverished as it is. You ever heard of the core group? You know who the core group is that's running Haiti? There's a group called the core group. And listen to this well. It's made up of America, France, Britain, Germany, Israel, and Canada, and Brazil. That core group, their corporate structure, is controlling the gold mining in Haiti. Haiti is estimated to have $30 billion worth of gold in the ground. That's an estimate. The uridium, Haiti has the second largest deposit of uridium in the world. You know what that is?
South Africa, right?
South Africa has the first. And I think the third would be the Congo, but Haiti is the second. $50,000 an ounce. But the Haitians are not mining that. The core group corporate structure is mining that, right? Haiti's got copper, major copper. The core group is mining that. Haiti's gold, the core group is mining that. Haiti has calcium deposit, the core group is mining that. Haiti has natural gas and oil off of its coast. Haiti's natural gas and oil deposits off the coast may be as big as Venezuela's, but America won't allow them to drill. And there's more. That's not even touching its agriculture possibility. Haiti has a greater agricultural capacity than any other island in the Caribbean. That's why the French didn't want to let go of it in the Haitian Revolution. That's what that was about. With all of this, why is there any poverty in Haiti? Now, the countries I just named as the core group: America, France, Germany, Britain, Israel, Canada, and Brazil. They're called the core group. They're Gilbert, an Israeli billionaire who's the richest man in Haiti, and one other Israeli billionaire who is in charge of the gold. He's also the runner of the gold in the Congo. And they all live right here in America and got homes in Haiti. Along with the other group is called the oligarchs. The oligarchs are the Syrian and Lebanese collaborators who the Haitians brought in during the Second World War to give them freedom from the Ottoman Turk Empire. Those traitors turned on Haiti years ago and became the collaborators that run the Haitian industry for the core group. You know, and these are the people who murdered President Moïse when he tried to get out from under them 3 years ago by going to Russia, Mr. Putin, the Turkish government, and the Venezuela's government asking for help. 2 months after he returned to Haiti, they assassinated him. You know, and now they've put together, it's these same groups that finance all the guns that's in the street of Haiti today. Because the people, they call them barbecue, and then the CNN try to make it sound like barbecue because they barbecue people in the street. No, he was a police officer, well-trained by America, right? His mother used to sell barbecue on the sidewalk. That's how he gets the name barbecue. Like what happened to me and you, if our mama was selling jerk chicken, we would get to be the jerk boy, you know? But the media makes it look like this is because he barbecued human beings. Without saying it, they implied it. And he's a policeman, and many of the men that are supposed to be leading these gangs are ex-policemen who are collaborators with the oligarch group on the ground, the Syrians, the Lebanese, and the Jews, Israelis. And they're the ones that finance them. Because none of them have the money to buy guns, and Haiti doesn't make any guns. So where's all those modern high-tech weapons coming from that's in their hands? High-tech. Right? So we got to be clear on what's going on in Haiti. The other thing with Haiti, America have the largest embassy in the Western Hemisphere in Haiti. Explain that. What is the largest embassy in the Western Hemisphere doing in this one of the smallest countries in the Western Hemisphere? Because that's how America is running its intelligence operation to control the rest of the Western Hemisphere. Lastly, the strait between Guantanamo Bay and Haiti, where most of the world's shipping go to get to the Pacific. They don't go through the Panama Canal because the Panama Canal wasn't built for the mega tankers and container ships that we have today. So they pass between Cuba and Haiti. America's controlling most of those islands off of Haiti that borders onto Cuba, as they still control Guantanamo and Cuba, to make sure that they control the flow of this commercial traffic of maritime shipping. That's what's going on down in Haiti. And they could still do all of this without deprivating and oppressing the Haitian people. Stop stealing their gold. Stop stealing their diamond. Stop stealing their uranium. Stop stealing their copper. Let them drill for their oil. If they did that, every Haitian would be a millionaire tomorrow. Every single one. But instead, because their skins are black and because of your hateful vengeance for the defeat of Napoleon Bonaparte, French couldn't defeat him. The British couldn't defeat him. The Germans couldn't defeat him. The Prussians couldn't defeat him. But a bunch of ragtime Africans in Haiti defeated and broke the back of the best military that Napoleon could send to the island, including the killing of his brother-in-law. Napoleon fell after the Haitian Revolution because we broke their back. And the vengeance in their mind will never let them forget or forgive. So that's the situation with Haiti, you know. And we said, I always remember our father Dessalines. He said, freedom or death. There's nothing in between those two choices. Freedom or death. And that's what the Haitian people need to rise back to. They need to rise back to Dessalines' standard of what freedom is, you know. But America, Germany, Britain, France, Israel, Brazil, and Canada is who controlling everything on the ground in Haiti. And they're known to the UN and the world as the core group. And the oligarch is we see all these light-skinned people running around Haiti with guns in their hand during the earthquake. Nobody ever asked who they were. That's who they were. And that's who they are. And they live in the hills, especially in the area called Pétionville, which is 15 minutes drive down from Port-au-Prince. And they show you Port-au-Prince, even after the Red Cross raised all those billions of dollars, they stole it and left Haiti. The Clinton and his wife stole $19 billion and left Haiti, and none of that money was used to build Haiti. And so when you see the rubble in Port-au-Prince, it goes back to the earthquake because they never fixed it. You go right down the road to Pétionville, and you think you're in Broadway or Times Square, where the rich, light-skinned ones live. And if you go the other way, they were talking, oh, you can't get any plane in there, and CNN was carrying out their job to do the setup for the American government, yet planes was landing every day in Cape Haitian, where the white folks was walking around the beach like there's nothing going on in Haiti. You know? So you put your gangs there, you arm your gangs to keep disorder while you try to reestablish control. And now you've put together your committee of 7 and talking about bringing in policemen from Kenya. What are you going to bring 1,000 policemen from Kenya who don't speak French, who don't speak Creole, all right? To govern Haiti, when you got 12,000 Haitian police, you won't train and you won't arm. You arm the gangs better than you arm the 12,000 policemen. That's what's going on in Haiti. So wake up and be free, Haitian people and black people, African people in general. Study and learn the truth. Go to the Free Haiti Now Foundation and the SLA Danton, and you will see what goes on in Haiti every day. You know, and the things I just told you that you didn't know, that these oligarchs and that runs Haiti, these mixed race people that Haiti gave refuge to in the Second World War, who now control that country, and the people who they control it for, the nations that I name, America, France, Germany, Israel, Brazil, Canada, and who I left out one? France. That's the core group. That's what they're called, the core group. And they're the ones that have now put together under Biden's direction, all right? And even when our little black president was in there, he supported and controlled the same group of people. He knew exactly, Obama, what was going on in Haiti. He collaborated with the killers and the murderers in Haiti. The Clintons collaborated with the killers and the murderers of Haitian people in Haiti. Biden is collaborating with the killer, and the murderers in Haiti. Let's be free. Let's tell the truth. Let's stop the lying about the poor, impoverished Haitian people. Leave those people alone. They can elect their own president. They can choose their own government. Why you got to put together a committee of 7 people to put together the government of Haiti for the Haitian people? To put together their own company. Then you got another group out here calling themselves the Montana Group. You heard of them? Never heard of them. They call them, look it up. Look it up. Who's this Montana Group? And you'll see Ron Daniels' involvement with them. You'll see Al Sharpton involvement with them. They're sitting there as a part of this core group of this group of 7 that is supposed to be now naming who's going to be the leaders of Haiti. Who the hell are they? The president, the mayor of New York, you saw him standing with Sharpton having press conference, but people didn't pay to the press conference and what he was saying. They were having a press conference, tell these people to send invaders into Haiti to take over the Haitian government for the people. The Haitian people are suffering. They're suffering because you're oppressing them. Get the hell out of their country. Leave them alone. Take your guns back. The UN passed an ordinance, a law, saying no guns should come into Haiti years ago. Where are these guns coming from? The Haitian people don't own the ports. They don't own the airports. You own it all. You know? So, yeah, that's some of what's happening in Haiti. You know, that people need to know.